I would like to introduce the moderator for the session, Mr. Ravi Pratap Singh, who is the Regional Director for ADE Axon for Southeast Asia. He has been in the development sector for the last 24 years and has a very rich experience of working in different sectors. That includes livelihood, education, and he spent 4 years at grassroots working with the marginalized communities. And at the moment, he is heading ADE Axon, which is a Geneva-based organization that works in 32 countries and works mainly on the issue of education. So I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Ravi Pratap Singh and begin the session on sports for development and livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you, Devda. Good afternoon, all of you. Can you hear me? Okay. I have a very distinguished panel around to moderate. It's a challenging job for me, but knowing their experiences and the range of experiences they come with, I think this is going to be an enriching session for all of us. What I would request each of the panelists here to share very briefly about their own experience with respect to two things. When we talk of sports and livelihood, in my view, there are two broad sectors which we need to look at. One is that how sports lead to more meaningful livelihoods. Some of the discussion which we had in the plenaries before. And the second one, to look at the possibilities of livelihood within the sports sector. There was a brief mention of that again in the previous plenaries. And see how these two things work in our own with our own experiences, and chart out the challenges which we might have in these two broad sectors. I'll quickly introduce you to the panel here. On the leftmost side is Manju. Manju is lead for community affairs with Microsoft India. They are doing very major program called Youth Spark, and they have been involved in skills development program with youth for many years now. So she does come with that experience. Within India, it's a major program. Immediately left to me is Anuradha. Anuradha is the managing trustee of Dr. Reddy's Foundation, which is also one of the pioneers in the skills development sector in India. And they have a very, very large, efficient program on skills development spread across India. So she would be sharing her experiences during this session. On my right is Steve. Steve is from Kick for Life. He is the CEO of Kick for Life. And next to him is Julie George. She's the program director for Skillshare International, which is again doing a lot of work in the area of skill development across the globe. And rightmost is Prateek. Prateek is the CEO of Magic Bus India, and he has perhaps more direct engagement on sports and livelihoods than all of us. So let me start by individual brief presentations, and then we will open it up for discussion. May I request Anuradha you to start with? Since she comes with, I think, the richest experience in this sector.
nothing really to do with sports. This is something which, since I've been in the sessions from the morning, and I realized sports such an important role to play, but somehow we've never looked at it. In vocational skills, I think we're more looking at employment, and we're looking at trying to, try to give skills in about 3 months and try to place them, and somehow we've never thought of this aspect of sports, but really it was a very enriching experience for me to sit through the whole sessions in the morning, and thank you for inviting me. Maybe a little bit, I talk about Dr. Reddy's Foundation. We started in 1999. Dr. Anji Reddy, our founder, he came from a very small village, and then he felt, he came and he made it so big in society that he wanted to give back, and what better thing to do than to provide livelihoods. So that was his interest, and we started this program in 1999 with one center training about 9 aspirants, most of them school dropouts. We worked with them in life skills, basically giving them confidence, giving them basic English education and computer skills. And we also worked with corporates to place them in jobs. And we found that when they were placed and they were working alongside with graduates, and they were very confident, they were on par with the graduates. So we found the program very successful. We expanded this to more centers. We had a lot of partners on board. We had government with us. We had a lot of other corporates who liked this model and asked us to implement this for them. So we've grown from one center. I'm not looking at that.
Yeah. I think this is more effective. It comes from heart.
Yeah. So right now we are about 75 centers all over the country, in about 18 states, and for the past 3 years we've also been working with people with disabilities, and that's been a little challenging for us. First of all, to give them confidence that they can come out and work, and also for employers to hire them. So it's been challenging, but we're working at it. We've trained closely about 2,300 youth so far and placed them. That's the program with the disabled people with disabilities. We also work very closely with the Vocational Rehabilitation Center for the Handicapped. We also do a lot of work along with partners, and that's how we are able to reach the scale. Some of our major partners have been Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, Accenture, Cognizant Foundation, BPCL, Ernst & Young, BlackRock, to name a few. There's this labs process. I'd like to explain how we go about the training program. We start with market evaluation. We also go to the community, identify youth from the community, design a program for them, and start the program. Our main focus is on life skills. I think once that is done, then the other skilling becomes much easier. Once they're confident and they can take on any challenge, and we work with the basic computer skills, and we also have a individual plan for them, development plan for them, which they work on themselves. Each individual has their own plan, how they look at life, how they're going to succeed in life. So that's one thing that we do, and then we also prepare them to face interviews. There's a work readiness module. And finally, after placement, we also engage with them for a couple of months, so that they stay in the job and don't leave. That's been our process. We've so far reached to about 3 lakh youth in the country, and I think a couple of years ago we also till I think 2010 our program was free for all, since we had partners. We never charged the aspirant anything. But from 2001 we said we should go on a sustainability model, try to raise some fee from the aspirant, so that from beneficiary they turn into a customer. That's something we've started doing from the year 2001. We've achieved a fair amount of success. Some returns we do get. We still support in a major way, but we feel that is the way forward for this work. And then another thing that we're working on is in rural livelihood areas. We also find that small farmers, we help them with knowledge about latest technologies and techniques in the area of. We also found there's a lot of migration happening when the youth were looking for jobs. Since there was nothing in the village, they had to come to the cities, and it really was not effective for them, moving out. And so we thought we'll work with the youth in the villages. We work with the farmers. We also work with youth who are, in the village, try to find them some kind of employment in the surrounding areas, so that they don't have to migrate. That's one program that we've been doing. So we call the program Skilling Rural India. This is a fairly new program. There's a lot of learnings happening. We still haven't got a clear model, but this is kind of work in progress. I think broadly this is the kind of work that we do. And in sports, we've not really looked at it, livelihoods, so hopefully something will emerge soon. Thank you.
I think important thing is that Dr. Reddy's foundation does recognize the importance of soft skill or life skill development, and sport does play an important role in that part of skilling. One of the other things which I have been particularly impressed with is about Dr. Reddy's foundation's work is that they do recognize that there is a need to have customized training programs. But they have worked on some kind of standardization also, which has contributed to quality of training in that sense. So I just wanted to add that.
I think I wouldn't say it to people who are here, because I think more or less the same principles are being applied by many of you who are engaging sports. I think it's one of the best tools that we have actually now see as an effective tool for social change. Because when we started, actually, I can talk more about India, because we have just started it recently, over 3 years now. And we have seen young people who wouldn't, these are all village youngsters, who won't even look at an advertisement for condoms. Now they actually promote condom use within the villages, telling their young people about their peers about safe sex. And so that was a big change, that they actually promote, they do it on a volunteer basis. None of them gets paid anything by Skillshare or anything by under the coaching program. They really want to help their villages, so they go ahead and do these things. Right. Currently, that's a long list. A lot of people across the world help us, and most of the football federations from the UK also help us. Sports bodies like Adidas help us. They support us in many ways. Okay, we have actually a very specific, specially designed toolkit which actually looks at what's the impact, because it's not just about going and what we call as just playing football, but also to see how does it make a change in the lives of people in the community, in the lives of young people, in the lives of, women who are, or young girls who have never actually stepped out of their homes. How has it changed or questioned this traditionally what we call as a masculine game, because it's a sign of masculinity to go out and play kick football. Now girls are doing it, so how we actually kind of question that, and how are girls changing by engaging in football and games, how the girls actually changing the stereotypical way of looking at games and sports. And the girls also go out of the village now to deliver courses in other places. From Koraput now they have started going to Goa, and also to teach the city tribe in northern Karnataka. Right. Now, this is primarily about African coaches, that this particular story. We have, these numbers have now gone up. We have actually trained close to 1,000 coaches in Africa who are delivering this program to the other young people in the field. And many of I think the idea was that, we never started, when we started, we never looked at livelihood as an option and employability as an option. But now what's happening is that many of them are getting employed by sports clubs, by other football clubs. They have reached a stage where they can actually become professional footballers. And many have joined teams. In Koraput it was very amazing because there is all 10 school dropout, 12 school dropout, or young people who have actually now, they set up a football club for themselves. They have reached to a stage where they actually reached the semi-finals in the state level football matches organized by the government, which was a big achievement for us. There were boys who never went out, never played, never touched a football, because nobody actually brought them into that space. Now, this team has actually reached that space. Children and young people, like overall over 30,000 children have been trained across the world, in Western Africa, Southern Africa, and in India. In Southern Africa, we work in South Africa, Lesotho, and Botswana. And in Western Africa, in Burkina Faso and Mali. And in Mali, we don't even have an office, but the coaches who have been trained by us have become all volunteer coaches, and they are delivering these programs at the local level. And the community, of course, normally is also change in perceptions about young people within the communities. This we have seen also in India. Young people are normally useless guys. Not doing any damn thing, just sitting around in street corners. But that perception is changing. Plus, community, there's a cohesion that is happening within the community because of the team building that happens. This is a theory of change. I just leave it as like too long. But I think if you look at livelihood, these are, 3 levels things have been happening. One, children who had dropped out of school are going back. Young people, slightly older, group, 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, who have dropped out of schools have now gone back to vocational skills and taking up jobs. And at least one person got into Tata Steel, which was a big thing for us. This guy was playing football and he had, of course, some polytechnic qualifications, but he was literally just loitering around in the village. Now, because of the sports thing, he has got a job within Tata. And that's only just one example of thousands of people whom we have trained. But we also have now plans to set up a football academy in Jharkhand. Somebody donated land to us, so we are trying to set up a football academy where we can actually coach good quality coaches, but also to make that an income generating opportunity or a livelihood opportunity or an enterprise business opportunity for young coaches from the tribal community who have been trained by us. Okay. I think that's it in short.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for an elaborate presentation. I'll request presenters to focus on these 2 aspects and related experiences so that we have more time for all of you to share your experiences or throw questions to may I request now Manju? Tarik,
So I'll be honest, can you hear me? Okay. So my position is a bit like Anuradha, where I have extensive experience both as with Microsoft and outside of Microsoft with Livelihoods program. Not too much of sports and using sports for livelihoods. So I see, Prateek, a nice bit of positive conspiracy here to ensure that really, because I think this whole day and while preparing to present something to you, gave me an opportunity to really look at my program and see how we can actually inculcate and integrate sports more actively in it. So I'll be honest and I'm being upfront. I may not be able to draw on real examples that we've been using in our program, but maybe give you a bit of a perspective of how we have moved and how in that new paradigm shift or shift in our livelihoods program, I see more of a space for sports and development, and sports and youth development and livelihoods. So a bit of a background, Ravi spoke about it. Globally, Microsoft has a program which is called Youth Spark. And this program is actually about, globally over the next 3 years, we could connect 300 million young people across 100 countries with opportunities for skilling, training, mentoring, for continuing their education, for starting their own enterprises. So that's really broadly what the program is about. In India, the way the program is, we work with non-profit partners like AD Action, Aided Action, how it's often referred to in India, with Aga Khan support program, with Anudeep Foundation, who've been very active in the livelihood space. We don't directly implement programs, we work with them, and therefore in that space, and basically leverage how they work with their communities and then work with young people. So every learning that I have here actually comes from the learning I've had talking with people like Ravi, with some of the field implementation staff and the young people themselves. So that's really where it's coming from. So to give you a little bit of a genesis, I think which will be important in this context, Ravi, if you'll allow me, is that we began with what is called traditionally workforce development programs, which is training the young people, giving them some job readiness training and then putting them in jobs. And that's really what our program was totally about. Success metric around how many young people have been trained and how many have been placed in jobs. But in the last 2 years, as we visited and as I have visited the field and interacted with a lot of young people, I've realized that workforce development programs, while there is a lot of space for it in India, the tragedy and the reality is there are just not enough jobs being created to place all these young people into jobs. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to read the Hindustan Times, the newspaper daily yesterday. Did you look at the article about how the unemployment rate among 15 to 29 has gone up in the last 2 years, in spite of almost all government programs targeting unemployed youth? So let's look at a scenario where we don't have enough jobs coming up. We probably do not have, and the employers maybe not with the kind of young people we target, which is the rural marginalized youth. Employers may not be really interested in picking up young people who are unskilled or have low education level. Now, what do you do with these young people when they come into your skills and training program? What have you done? And you've actually built their expectations. They expect to get into a job, but they're not going into a job because there aren't enough jobs. Or with some of the groups that we work with, like Muslim girls in very, very rural Bihar. They have restricted mobility. They can't move out of their homes and look for a job. And even if we try and create something of a job scenario for them in the local environments, there is going to be a lot of challenge to work with their families to get them into this kind of job. So is there no hope for them? Our livelihoods program now going to leave them out of the purview because we are not going to be able to put them into a job? So I think as we thought about it, we thought there is a need to move to workforce development programs or traditional workforce development program and broaden the horizon to have what is called livelihoods development strategies. And truly my comments really come from that if we were to broaden that whole definition, then I see a lot of space for sports and development. Because what is the difference between a workforce? In my mind, what differentiates a livelihood program from a pure workforce development program is you're going to give a variety of skills to a young person. it's not only going to be about strictly training. You're going to look at how they're going to negotiate the spaces in their life. How do they build their social capital? How do you help them to build on assets that they already have, which may not require them to actually go into jobs? And that's really where I see a big place for sports, and sports at least in my program, and that's what I take back. Because most of these young people who come into our program, and this is what I hear from a lot of I actually tend to get to meet them when they're already successful in court case studies. I don't meet them when they come into our centers, but this is what I hear constantly from my trainers, from program managers. When they come into the center, most of them don't even, they're not able to manage an eye contact. We're not talking about actually interacting, but even managing eye contact is difficult. These are really smart young people. They're very smart because in 3 months, otherwise it would not be possible for a non-profit of any power to take them from there and get them into a situation where they're interacting with people. So they have it, but there are traditional ways in which we look at young people's skills, and they don't maintain eye contact. Many of them have low negotiation skills aside, low feelings of empowerment. Many of them actually have been school dropouts, and it's been 4 to 5 years since they've not been doing anything before they come into a system. And that is truly where we need to first start with. And as I said, and this is something I've heard and learned from Ravi, to move from job readiness to making them life ready, and that's truly where sports plays a very, very important role. The other place where I think my program and our program is going to look at sports more actively is, it's cliche and it's a jingoism in many ways when we say that young people have to be involved in changing their own lives. And we say they have to be involved in every part of the program. And I think it's just fair because what we've seen in our livelihoods program, that young people and their families are willing to invest both time and money. And so we have something called the user fee concept. If they are also investing in it, it just makes sense that you involve them in the program. But that's really easy to say. How do you involve young people who probably, and not because they're not bright or they don't know what works for their life, but they haven't been part of a system where people have asked for their opinions. How do you really get them together in a way, in an institutionalized way? And I deliberately use the word institutionalized here. In an institutionalized way, get them to really input into the program and take ownership of the program. And I truly see sports and development where it builds team, it builds leadership skills, playing a very, very important role. And I personally, for me, I feel that within the livelihoods program, these are 2 areas that I clearly see for my program itself to involve sports into the livelihoods program. My apologies, Ravi, I don't think I can comment too much on how I see sports as a livelihood option. I've taken down some notes, and maybe if we have this workshop again here, I'll be able to contribute to that. Okay, that's good.
I think in a sense we achieved part of the objective of this conference when companies like Microsoft make some kind of commitment. So I really like really liked Prateek's idea of calling that was a plan. Yeah, that's a positive conspiracy. We got Ranjan from NSDC committing in the other plenary, and here Manju committing that Microsoft will have greater share of sports into their programs. So wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing evolution of your program, which is quite inspiring. And I think companies like Microsoft should lead the way for many other companies to follow the. Thank you. And I think we should move to someone who has been very closely involved with sports, livelihood, and development within Kick for Life. Steve, I'll request you to share your experience. Can I get the laptop? I would like to apologize to all of you because we are running slightly late, and I have some other engagements tomorrow. For that, I have to catch a flight. So I'll be leaving in between. But before I leave, I would request Prateek to share his experience, and then start moderating this session when I disappear. But before I leave, I wanted to leave a question with you with a story. A year and a half back, we got to know a person called Shanti, a young athlete in India, who had won Asian Games medal in Doha Asian Games for India. She had won more than 70-80 medals at national level athletics championships. And then we met her in a brick kiln, working as a laborer. So we were struck by her condition, and then we found out that she is doing it because she has to take care of her parents and education of her siblings. And Doha Asian Games were not very far. So I said, but why it has happened so? Shanti, who grew up as a woman all through her life, won so many medals at the national level. When in the Asian Games, they applied the sex determination test. Unfortunately, she didn't have sufficient hormones to say that she is a woman, and she failed that test. She was stripped of her Asian Games medal, all the prize money, everything. Now, she's the person who came to our iLead Center. She started a lot of sports training and other things. Many of the young boys and girls are inspired by her. Fortunately, very recently, National Institute of Sport recognized her talent, and they said they will invite her for the coach training in athletics, and they have relaxed the sex determination test for her. So that's a positive side of it. But I'd like to leave a question with all of you, that it's not just use of sports and all those things, but I think we need to look at the larger mindset in the society. Look at this girl, who was born as a girl, lived, grew up as a girl, and then suddenly just one hormonal test says that she's not a girl, and she's stripped of everything, all her laurels, all her pride, and all that. So that's one thing probably we need to look at. And the other thing which is linked to that is the policies of our sports authorities and international sports bodies. Whether they need to look at purely medical reasons for classifying human beings as men, women, and all that, or they also need to consider sociological reasons in that. So I'll leave with that. I'll miss out on all that discussion which will be happening here. So in that sense, I'm unfortunate. But I'll catch up with some of you later on to gather what all has happened. All the best for the discussions and goodbye.
Okay, I'd like to build on the point I made at the end of the last session about Kick for Life's experience of setting up social enterprises and how this has made a big difference to our livelihood programs and enable us to support young people into employment and training. Very quickly take you through our journey. Started in 2005 with a very simple concept that we wanted to use football and sport as a tool for development. We hadn't even begun to think about livelihoods at this stage. By 2007, we were in a position to actually launch a project out in Lesotho, which you can see there on the map, fully surrounded by South Africa. And we focused our initial efforts on the immediate crisis of HIV, providing health education through a sports-based curriculum, and HIV testing and links to counselling and medical treatment. And at this point, 90% of our funding came from one source. As you'd probably expect with a young organisation, 90% was from the Vodafone Foundation and a small amount from elsewhere. And that is obviously not a particularly strong position to be in. If one funder drops out, you suddenly find yourself in a bit of trouble. So from the start, we recognised that we needed to diversify our funding bases. By 2009, we also learnt that just addressing health was not enough to change the lives of the most vulnerable young people, and that we needed to take a holistic approach to their well-being, to address education, to address shelter, protection, psychosocial counselling, all of these areas. And as a result, we moved towards this longer-term intervention. But how can you support someone ultimately into employment in a country where there's 40% unemployment? And this got us thinking initially about livelihoods, and also about actually setting up our own social businesses so that we could support people into jobs and employment in a safe environment, in an environment they trusted, and then from there hopefully go on to find work elsewhere. By this point, our diversification process was paying off. Still Vodafone were a major part, but we brought in a couple of other funders such as Laureus and the GIZ, and some more fundraising overseas. A landmark moment for us was the opening of the Football for Hope Centre in Lesotho as part of 20 centres for 2010, through which FIFA supported facilities across Africa that had sports facilities, health and education, classrooms and clinics. And we recognised that here was great potential for us to use the Centre for Social Enterprise, for example, using this fantastic 5-side AstroTurf pitch, the only one in the country for running a corporate league. I thought it would be useful to also give you a brief description of how we see social enterprise. There's a lot of definitions out there, but for us we saw it essentially as something which is profit making. Profits obviously being pumped back into our charitable programmes. An activity that empowers participants to achieve sustainable livelihood, so we didn't want to just run a business like any other business, we wanted to involve young people. And also an activity that has a wider social benefit. So we didn't just want to sell computers or anything like that. We wanted to do something, for example, do a recycling scheme, which is the first of its kind in the country, and we're offering people the opportunity to have their waste recycled. And there's a nice picture of the centre. And that brings us up to the present. And our programming has evolved to the point where we're now working intensively and holistically with our participants. And our centre has become a real hub, not only of social development, but also of economic activity, but economic activity that involves our participants. To give you some examples, I won't talk about all of these, but the top one is probably the most exciting one for us. We've set up a restaurant at the centre. We managed to get some funding from a local bank to build an additional building at the Football for Hope Centre, and had an idea of having a restaurant that would be that would employ our participants as trainees. We'd have an experienced restaurant manager and a head chef, but it would bring the local community into the centre to learn about what we're doing, and learn about, hopefully bring in new funders and that type of thing. And it's now open. It's a high quality restaurant providing meals at the centre, and it's making a profit. We've employed 15 young people who are on 7 to 9 month traineeships. They're learning all aspects of working in a restaurant, food preparation, front of house, handling money, all these types of things are essential really if you want to go on and have a career in that industry. And at the end of it, they either stay on and work with us at the restaurant, or we link them to a hotel or a restaurant elsewhere to have a full-time career. This is a girl called Tasoto who has been through our programs, started off at a young age playing football, has been through our health education, and is now going through a traineeship at a restaurant. There's some more of the team. Our financial model is also now much more diverse, as well as having grant funding, which is fantastic, but often short-term and unreliable. We've brought in some corporate support, fundraising, and our social enterprise is actually a significant part of that. About 15% of all our income is self-generated. That's really empowered us as an organisation, as well as the participants, and it's given us much more independence in planning, to have that unrestricted funding to actually direct it where we most need it. We still value the involvement of our funders, such as UNICEF, because they bring expertise and accountability, but having that element of independence as well has proven very valuable for us. I won't run through all of these lessons that we've learned, but we've learned a lot, as you can see. Pull out a couple here. One is that you need to involve your participants appropriately. you can't throw them in at the deep end in an enterprise. They need to be trained, they need to be supported and structured. It needs to be part of a much wider holistic package of support. I won't go into any more detail, but if you are interested in finding out more about our experience, please come and find me elsewhere during the conference. We'll talk you through in more detail. And I won't cover that now either. So for the future, as I mentioned in the last session, we're even thinking now about repositioning ourselves as a social enterprise football club. We're attracting fans to come and watch our games. They're using the restaurant. We've got a hotel operation coming. We've got conferences being held at the centre. Having a football team is really attracting a lot of interest across the country. Potentially we could have sponsorship boards around the pitch. And for the young people, it's really exciting for them to come and be in that environment. So that's an idea we've got at the moment. And really just to support more young people into jobs with us and beyond. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Feels strange to have this dual role out of nowhere. So what should I do? Moderate or speak or what? I'll do both. No, I'll actually speak and then probably do the moderation because there's nothing really to moderate here. So actually, I was just kind of thinking from perspectives of you two here, because I mean, three of us, and the divide is pretty sharp. You can see there's a chasm in between, so there's a lot to fill. But it's a very, very manageable chasm. And the beauty of it is to just look at livelihood differently. And I kind of keep on saying this because I'm not a regular football guy who's got into Magic Pass because I love football and that's what I wanted to do. I'm here because I think it's a fantastic tool and a tool like no other. Hence, it should be used the way it should be. And that's my position. And I completely drive myself through evidence, through the mere fact that the kind of potential sport has. And I'd like to expand the definition of sport to include activities and activity-based learning here. People tend to also include a lot of other activities, typically whether it could be like a painting or a singing or a theatre and stuff like that, and create this larger bucket of what they call activities. Now I've seen all of them work in different proportions at different points of time. And a lot of organizations sitting here do tend to use activities. So you talk to someone who's an educationist, they normally turn around and say, oh, I also do activity-based learning. But this is the buckets of activities that they're normally referring to. But if you go to a school, and this is again by experience that I've seen, if you go to a school and if you just have to randomly select a bunch of 50 children, the chances that these children will come to you again and again because you have a dance session happening, or a theatre, or whatever, or a singing experience, again and again, is very, very minimal. But the chances that 40 out of those 50 come to you because you've given them play is very, very high. And that's been something that I've kind of discovered. I won't say to my surprise, but it's just kind of dawned on me that, well, there is a way which we call activity-based engagement techniques. But sport is by far the lowest common denominator here. The chances that kids and youth will be drawn naturally towards sport than any other attractive means of engagement is much, much higher. And that's possibly the biggest lever that we are trying to push within Magic Pass and entities around in this room and otherwise who are using sport as a tool for engagement. That's point number one. So I just wanted to expand the basket of sports by not just competitive sports, which typically translates into football in a lot of our lives. But yes, it's about a lot of activity-based engagement and physical activity-based engagement. So that simplifies life to a great deal, because otherwise, I come across a lot of people also who kind of feel left out that, you always talk football. It's always football and that hogs the limelight. Where are we? Just the way the world gives us a step shoulder. That's the way the sport for development fraternity is also, treating us, which is not the case. Actually, I'm sure Gurvinder sir is smiling away, and I know exactly why he's doing that. it is a tough space for a lot of sports because they don't necessarily get that recognition, and they also do a fantastic job because it embodies the principles of how learning really happens. And that's the trick that I just want to give a quick theoretical snapshot, I would say. There are 6 theories of learning which define how a brain responds to certain stimuli. You get excited about learning only in certain situations. You learn better because there's a certain environment that is created around you which allows a better or a stronger transfer of knowledge. Each of them can be created on a sport field using very, very minimal resources and minimal training. So some of those theories translate into very simple things like, do you have a chance to repeat the message? Do you have a chance where you can pat somebody's back and encourage somebody's learning? Do you have a chance to be non-judgmental and create a space which is non-threatening? Make it fun. Now these are the 4 or 5 things in that 6th theory of learning which is universally applied to how really good learning happens, which can be replicated in a sport field or beyond a sport field. Because you can carry the ambience of a sport field into the 4 walls of a classroom. And that's what a Magic Pass and entities like us do. We kind of carry that ambience, that feeling of camaraderie, that ethos of having a non-threatening, non-judgmental environment. Take it across from the play field to the 4 walls should you have a vocational training discussion, which obviously is a little more complicated, and hence you need some people to either go through a lathe machine or run through a PowerPoint slide because those are technical matters. But then that's one part of learning. And I was very happy when Manju mentioned about this job readiness to life readiness. And that's something that we have been pushing aided action as well. That you guys need to open up your mind. It's not about jobs. I don't know how many people, at least from India, could go through something called the Accenture report now, where Accenture and NSDC, 2 big players for livelihood in India, they themselves have come together. And they're talking about 30% of people who go through the programs actually being on the job. So you're talking about 70% dropping out. So what is really happening? The reality of India is that there's so many people who've been trained like machines. You kind of go into a setup, you get trained, and off you are there to perform in the world. And the world is not just about technical skills. There's a lot. Life readiness is not about technical readiness. And that's the missing piece which is now being felt. And that's where Accenture and NSDC are now turning around. I remember having a conversation with them, and NSDC said, brilliant, this is your tool which can keep my students in a vocational training hostel for 4 months. Otherwise they slip away in a month or 2. Everybody gets dead bored and they're just off. They're switched off, they'll come once in a while, they'll be least interested in what's happening. But I see this is a wonderful tool. But this is not my technical tool, so what do? I can't pay you for this. Today they're talking a different language because they know they've invested wrong. But this fraternity had to push for it very, very hard. The Sport for Development fraternity, coming from India where sports, as you would have heard several times over, is not treated with any kind of priority. Sports is a bad thing to indulge in. And if in such a scenario you're pushing your case that, okay, let's get active, let's do sports, nobody is listening. But thankfully, as Vijay Amritraj himself was mentioning, things are changing in India as well. So just to give you a kind of a quick feedback on what Magic Pass kind of believes in its approach, we are fully aware that sport is not the panacea for all the ills, but it is the fantastic glue to keep youth engaged into a program, build life skills and softer skills. There are many other classical methods to do it. If you do it through sports, it will be much more fun. The kids will look forward to that 1 hour of fun and game every single day of a 3-month vocational training. Right? That's typically the pattern in India, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months vocational training. But if you give him that 1 hour of solid happiness, he or she is going to come back to you and again and again. That's your window where you can transform him, give him or her knowledge, and make him do great things. Make him feel great about himself or herself, so that when he walks up to you, he can look into your eye. Now, these are the things which are missing that a vocational training institution will not train you into. Then, reflect it from another perspective altogether. If you are an HR manager, what are you looking for in an individual? You don't go around asking for qualifications all the time. A lot of times you're basically asking, We're looking at this person, whether he's a leader, whether he's a team player, whether he's disciplined, can he communicate or not. Now, aren't these skills that necessarily are given in a sport field by default? We don't have to plan it, it just happens. The way these activities are engaged in, all these come in by default. I was actually speaking at an HR conference and the guys were looking at me like, yeah, this is what happens and this is what we look for. We don't really look for degrees and because I can get a person and train him for 2 months if it's a technical skill which is all that is missing. But these are life skills and these life skills cannot be manufactured. And this is what Magic believes in, you invest in somebody for a long period of time. Because again, you cannot have a factory approach in a life skill situation. You cannot have one. It takes time to build up the backgrounds, the centuries of inertia, the mindsets that we're talking about. It'll take decades. It has kind of ingrained in that young person's mind over decades of whatever. Now suddenly to switch it around to get this person to think modernly and not still feel out of the world, not become the violent upstart that he's going to his family and he's opposing everything that is happening there, because even that's not a situation that we want. So how do you strike the right balance where the person becomes modern enough to find his or her space and not be a rebel without a cause? This normally takes time and you need to engage with a young person over a period of time, which cannot happen to 2 or 3 month modules. In our experience, this is what we believe in, especially if you're talking about centuries of inertia. This is in a nutshell what we were wanting to say. Apart from that, we do run our vocational training centers now. Clifton, I'm happy to tell you we have 15 of them in the country now. So we want to keep increasing them, and these kind of run through our regular vocational training programs that we have. And we see a lot of demand coming up. But the good thing about us is that we are not losing focus on the youth. My youth is at the center of whatever I do. So when I do an aspirational study, I'm happy to have a vocational which is only theatre, because the kids out there want to join the Bollywood industry in Thane. I don't care, it's fine. All you guys get theatre. Devdutt is the Maharashtra head, he runs this program. A lot of kids go through our leadership program and they get to know about the local self-governance concepts in India, and they want to join the local self-government as panchayat leaders. So we're running programs that are only meant for politics. So be it. We respond to your need rather than telling them that these are the vocations you fit in. Get yourself trained in here and migrate, which is again another disaster that we're staring at. Because a lot of us are looking at the low-hanging fruit, creating jobs in the urban spaces, and all we're trying to do is have these young people from villages migrate to urban centers. Our centers are already choking, so where are we headed? So these are the kind of challenges that we have and we need to be cognizant of. Again, sports is not the panacea for all else, but it's a fantastic tool for engagement and long-term sustenance of any program. This is my pitch as the speaker. So just to switch on my moderator hat here. Maybe I've given you some feel of where we think it can add value to any existing program, which can have focus the way exactly it is. But it's more about how do you include a sport or an activity-based angle, which will just add a few flavors, which will allow participation, which will allow engagement, which will allow a lot of life skills to transfer. And I think that's about it. Because opening vocational training centers, there are far too many of them already around, and there'll be more coming up anyway in the days to come. So maybe this is enlightening you a little further. So the idea was not necessarily to just put you on a spot and
No, I'm very happy to be in this spot. No, I love it. no, that's not an issue.
So I don't have any questions for the panelists right now because I'm cognizant of the fact that we're getting very late. Do you have questions for the panelists, including me? And we're happy to take the mic around and yes, sir.
Very good evening to everybody here. I actually am from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So as a student of social entrepreneurship, I've had the great opportunity of pursuing research and interventions in the field of sports and development. So I have two questions. One is to Julie ma'am. With regard to your interventions in certain Dalit families in Kerala, you said, and tribal hamlets in Karnataka, one of the key challenges to any sports and development program in rural areas we found is that the caste of the children becomes a big issue. So, what are the kind of strategies that you felt work in breaking caste consciousness among children? Because we felt that if you are able to break that, especially using contact sports, contact sports was in a space where untouchability is practiced and things like that. So it could really help break rigid oppressive structures and help young people from marginalized communities. So with respect to that, if you've had any strategies in your programs. And my second question is to Mr. Stephen. I was really great to hear about your initiative and we're planning something similar in an area in Chhattisgarh. My question is, how important is a playground and play space as such in developing, let's say, any sports and development program into a social enterprise? And because government itself has been initiating schemes to develop play spaces in certain areas. So, how important do you think is the development of a play space important to any initiative? Thank you.
Though I'm on the panel, I would like to add to the gentleman's question. I think so. I'd like to add is for either of you could take it. Is that one of the challenges that I now think about to include or integrate sports into my programs is how much of training of the trainers itself. So we work in resource crisis settings. We can't really hire somebody who's going to specifically look at sports as a means within the entire program. So within the constraints that Pratik laid out, that we do have programs of 4 to 5 months, and we want to integrate this in a most organic way as possible, how much training of the trainers would be required, how much would be required to make that shift?
So, 3 questions. Caste, playgrounds and training.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just start with this. I think the biggest strategy or the strongest strategy was using sport itself. Because across, fishing community, those people who belong to artisanal fishing community, they are not Dalits. But we had mixed groups of Dalit and people as well as people from the, the fishing communities. And we had absolutely no problem because sports actually brought them together. There is no fights, and they all work together, they play together, they have different teams, so there was absolutely nothing. But in northern Karnataka, it's the African origin cities, and they are just primarily, they have retained all the genetic features. So to look, they are actually, you'll think they are actually from Uganda. They are in fact from eastern part of Africa. They had come into India some 800 years ago or so, I think. And so among them it's very interesting. They have all kinds of religions among them. You will find a Muhammad in Pramila's house. The child is, because there is no difference, they all intermarry, but they all belong to different religions. Somehow because they have been here in India for ages, but absolutely no rioting, no fights, no nothing. So there we didn't have a problem at all. But in Kerala, of course, these are people coming together. And on the training bit, the first lot of the training actually is just a 5 to 7 days workshop. And the young people who have been trained with that workshop then start delivering the program. And there will be a local coach whom we employ. Somebody, either a state coach or whoever, who's really got good skills. And the person continues to mentor them. The first lot of workshops are delivered by people who are actually very, very good, like the British coaches that I was talking about. And normally the overall workshops runs into, maybe several, about 5-6 5-day workshops across the year. And that's it. And the coaches come on their own, they pay for themselves, they raise money.
Yeah, so the physical environment is very important. As you see from the picture we had up earlier, we've got a wonderful centre in Lesotho, and it is a very inspirational and aspirational place for the young people to come and take part in the activities. They typically in their day-to-day lives they don't get to go to a place like this, or when they come to Kick for Life to take part in our activities, it's special. But it's less important than the emotional environment, and that more than anything is created by our coaches. And that kind of brings me to the next point, that the training of the coaches is absolutely vital. They go through a program over 6 weeks where they're trained intensively in our curriculum and then they shadow some of our more established coaches. So before they actually are delivering on their own to young people, they've gone through a really intensive training program, and it's absolutely critical, the most important tool in your organisation. And I would certainly say definitely don't cut any corners trying to save costs in the training of your coaches, because it pays dividends in the end.
Anuradha madam has to go. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking our time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I realize the time has spilled over, and a couple of people who are supposed to leave by 5 had to adjust. Thank you so much. We will have the questions. It will continue. It's not anything. Can I just respond to the young man there? It's a very valid question, and but you know, a lot of traditional methods of breaking caste, creed, religion, sex barriers have not worked as effectively as a ball in the community. And again, this is a learning from me. I don't belong to this fraternity, so I keep repeating all this. It is the most amazing thing to integrate anybody. And of course, it has to be done in a particular way. You have to make the kids sensitive about it, and you have to have the right kind of coaches who at least themselves do not believe in it. If you have a coach who's completely biased, you lose the game even before you start. So in our training, in our volunteer training, and we've got 10,000 of them across the country, it starts off with a 5-day induction, and it's really a no-brainer. You don't have to be a football expert, because I kind of grappled with the first girl I can make a volunteer in my program. It's not a skill-based exercise. So we keep the skill minimal, and based on your competence, you can take it to another level altogether. But the first level is a minimum level. Anybody. So we go to a school, and the maths teacher can be my volunteer, because she doesn't have to start kicking the football around the way we see it on television. But she can very well lift the sari and go through a few cones and markers, which is good enough for a whole bunch of exercise. So it's kind of toned down to attract as much participation as possible. So that's all I wanted to say. Yes, sir. Sandeep at the back, and then Gurvinder sir.
Hi. I think you have not only 2 but 3, conspiracy theories. You had Ranjan, we had Manju, and myself. I think I was introduced to this model of sports for development a couple of days ago. It was like a romantic fantasy to me, but I think it's turning out to be true. And thanks to Magic Brass and specifically Sum and Prateek to kind of make me believe. However, I just have a question on one of the comments that I saw, that can we really have a skill-based model where we provide skills to some of our prospective youth? Is it a model that is going to work, or is there any comparing views?
Okay, we want to give it free as much as possible, but there are various models that do exist, and frankly, each of them have a rationale, and possibly we can take a good deep look on that, because that's a very different discussion, Sandeep. Why would somebody charge a fee and somebody not charge a fee? It has very different connotations in terms of how you build the business case. So I think Stephen in his restaurant courtyard, if he's kind of taking out to other youth, he might like to charge a fee because that's a sustainability issue for him. Maybe Stephen, you have more experience with this.
Yeah, certainly with our main programs we don't charge, because we're targeting the most vulnerable groups, and if we did charge them, they just wouldn't be able to attend. But for example, we do hire out our centre to schools and other youth groups who want to use the facilities as an enterprise model. But yeah, no, we don't charge our participants to take part in any activities.
Actually, I think I can take that, because my program is very similar to what Anuradha's program is. You need to understand what you mean by fees. This fees that you're saying is not like fees in schools or academic institutions, which is uniform or which is fixed, and we say that every young person who's to come for a program for 3 months, we charge them 100 rupees. This is very much left to the place that you're based out of. A program that I have in tribal Netram, where a young person spends pretty much 50 to 70 rupees to sometimes even come to the center, it will be criminal to charge a fees there. We don't do that, because the ownership and accountability for them to come is that they take that effort, pay that money to come into the center. However, if you have a center in Gurgaon, where the young people themselves are paying for it, so there are different models. some of the young people we train or retrain in the centers are economically productive and they are employed in jobs, and they come in and they come to actually upskill themselves. There is a fees, but then you're looking at a fees, we're talking about 500 rupees over a period of 3 months. That's truly, I mean, it's just fees only in terms of an accountability and ownership you've built. And I think not really the fees as in, it can really create sustainability. But yes, it goes about 10 to 15% towards building sustainability of that particular center and building ownership among the community. So that's the perspective of the fees.
Thank you. Thank you. Gurvinder sir, Mike here. Second round.
Good evening. My name is Gurvinder Singh. I am CEO of Rashtra Life Saving Society. I took to volunteerism after giving up on a corporate life. And it's the best decision I took in my life, and I want to share with you something about sports and see, most of the job readiness focuses on skills and knowledge development. We take a person, give them the skills and knowledge, and then try to change their attitude. Whereas in life skills preparation, what you're doing is you're actually changing the attitude. And then imparting the skills and knowledge for them to be able to do a great job. And wherever we have done this, where we have chosen people with the right attitude, which comes from sports, we found tremendous improvement. The kind of team spirit, the kind of commitment, the kind of go for it and give the best that you can only come from attitudinal changes which are developed early in life. That's why, Pratik, when you say that we're focused on youth, I think is absolutely spot on. And this experience over a 30-year period of my working in the corporate field has given dramatic and fantastic results.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening all. My name is Uma. I'm from the Sir Ratan Tata Trust. The trust has just begun to recognize the concept sports for development. So hopefully we are looking at a potential partnership with Magic Bus in North Karnataka. My question is actually to Stephen and George. Ms. George, actually you first. What has been the community acceptance to football in North Karnataka? Because we are also in the process of doing something similar in Yadgiri, which is in North Karnataka. So has the community accepted, because traditionally football is looked as an urban game, so how has it been accepted in the rural community, and also the response of young women to the game? And this is to the both of you, and perhaps Pratik you can jump in, is as to what has been the district government or the district headquarters support, including the local self-government bodies to the program. If you could just throw some light.
Right, in Northern Karnataka actually, the cities are historically athletes. They're long distance runners. They were used by the British and the Portuguese to, primarily by the South African traders and the British as long distance runners for post or whatever. They don't have an aversion to sports and games. And many of their girls and boys are actually like medal holders, but they're extremely poor, much poorer than the regular Indian origin tribes. And because of that, a lot of girls are actually, this is out of the way, but a lot of them are now getting into sex work in Goa. Okay, big problem for us. So we're trying to bring them back into the sports field. This is almost like, it's in their blood, sports. And we had they were very happy. In fact, people are asking for us to come and, coach the young children. They're fighting for it, like, all the young people and the children. It has made such a lot of difference to them. And the panchayat, like local governance, yes, the panchayat has given us we are only in one center now in Haliyar, and the panchayat has given us the ground where we have set up the goalpost, and we are trying to set up a small pitch for training, so that is not a problem there. They also think, okay, something good is happening, so we are supporting. You may not get that support everywhere, but here we don't have a problem. We had a little bit of delay because it's protocol and bureaucracy, but it went well. The sports definitely. No objections from the community. Community keeps asking us when you're coming back. So, absolutely no problem.
Yeah, we've had pockets of support from government, such as the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, who support our testing events. No funding really, because the government doesn't have much money. The economy is pretty underdeveloped there. So I think there is a will in government circles to support efforts, but not too much practical ability to do so. One area where we've worked really well with the government is we're part of a committee which developed a Bill of Rights for the Child in Lesotho, something which didn't exist before, and that's now passed through into law. We're yet to see kind of the fruits of that, but that's been a really positive involvement with the government.
This is to Manju. You're talking about the Hindustan Times report that quoted the NSO data. They showed decline or rise in unemployment. But this unemployment in rural area was, of course, more than the average for this age group of 15 to 29. But what was also written that in urban area it is even higher than the rural. And if you take it into the income levels, so for urban poor, the unemployment for last 2 years would have increased manifold. So my question to you is that, are you focusing as a special target group to the urban poor as opposed to the rural? Because the decline here is more and there may be a concomitant rise in crimes and all which may be this.
So the way Microsoft does this program is, we don't, as I mentioned, that we don't do the program directly. We work with non-profit partners, and therefore when we are for a block of 3 years, when we choose the non-profits we need to work with, we decide on what the bouquet is going to look like based on what the non-profit works with. Now, Aided Action, Ravi has left, but Aided Action is very focused on migration and they're very focused on urban poverty. So via the support to Aided Action, we're actually focusing more on urban poor and young people in the urban areas. And we also realize that as we work with more with Aided Action, that there are, when we say lack of skills, those lack of skills are very different for rural youth and very different for urban youth. Again, in urban areas, our programs are more focused on employment because that's what the young people want. However, when we come to rural area, our Rural Support Program only works in rural and tribal India with minority and marginalized populations. With them, we cannot, a traditional employment program will not work. There it is more about working with the young people to create a local livelihoods program, because first we have to create jobs before we can look at helping our young people into the jobs. So the program, if I describe it, will look very standard to you, but it changes from every center to center depending upon which is the young people we are reaching out. So it's a combination of everything. With Anudeep Foundation, I realize as I travel across India with my program that for an 18-year-old unmarried girl, I still can do a lot of things. For an 18-year-old married woman, a job is not an option at all. So we're trying to create entrepreneurship model there. Again, as we started creating entrepreneurship model, we realized risk-taking ability is not that easy. It's a mindset. You haven't been raised to start an enterprise of your own. You tell an 18-year-old to start something of their own. They don't have the negotiation skills to even talk to their family about it. So we are experimenting and piloting with a model of creating a group enterprise, or what is called a solidarity enterprise, maybe getting 9 or 10 of them together and starting something. So the program will differ based on the non-profit that we partner with.
Clifton, here's the mic. This gentleman? Oh, I thought there was a hand.
I don't know, she answered my... Okay.
Oh, okay.
My name is Clifton Rover. I'm from Munich, and I'm responsible for the foundation in Munich, and we are running sports for development programs in Germany, in Munich as well, based. And actually my question goes to all of us, and as we are here together, I constantly keep looking on the main title of this whole conference. It's the next step. I think this is it's a huge chance what we have ahead of us. We are together for the next 3 days, and this first day showed me very clearly how wonderful people are here together with impressing projects and personalities. So actually, this is what I want to take away after these next 3 days, and I'm really happy to find some key takeaways corresponding to this title, the next step. I think we have all experiences now for the last decade everywhere in the world, sports for development programs have been instituted. There's a lot of knowledge and expertise. But what is it limiting us today? And how can we get beyond? What are the next steps? And we're very happy to elaborate on this together with you in the next 3 days. That's actually a very broad question. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Good to see the audience engaged. And we'll try and come up with some next steps. There's a next step declaration that should try and capture something.
Very good evening, guys. This is Santosh here. Caution, actually, adding present. Expertise for livelihood. Livelihood, we are talking about job. Certainly, it's livelihood is not a job. Job is something joining other businesses. If we are talking about rural sector, job joining own businesses. We are not saying like the young person, young people forced to migrate from the place. We are trying to create an opportunity village itself. So how sports can create an opportunity village itself? Ravi sir proper caution, like how sports lead to livelihood more meaningful. I think sports lead to livelihood more meaningful rather than provide a livelihood. That's what I understand. If it's provide a livelihood, so there is many renowned sports persons in our history who are very renowned sports persons, but they are struggling to feed their family. So it's.
No, I think we never, none of the panelists ever cared to even suggest that sports itself is the livelihood. Never like that. It is more a means to an end, and the end is livelihood, also defined in a very different way. So it is not equaling to jobs, but mostly in the life readiness space. In fact, all the panelists here were fairly unanimous on this thing, that it's not the box of just jobs that we're trying to tick here, but it is about life readiness, which is about social well-being, which is also about economic well-being, which also means that you need to earn money from somewhere. Whether you do a job or you become an entrepreneur yourself, or you do something in the same village, in the same land that you occupy, and possibly produce more or whatever. So the options are many. So livelihood is defined a little more holistically here, at least for the panelists that are sitting here. And definitely not sports equal to job. That's one industry that you can go into, which is still about to happen in India. It's still not happening. So I think we've been fairly clear. We've not suggested it that way.
But I would really like to listen how sports can take to livelihood.
Actually, it can be a discussion
In the rural context, especially.
So sports becoming a livelihood in the rural context, is that the question?
How sports can be livelihood?
So can a sports person earn a living in the rural context? Is that what you're asking there?
How the sports can be linked with the livelihood? As we are discussing here about the livelihood, and we are talking about sports also. So he is asking how the sports can be linked with the livelihood.
So please, I think we need to just get something very clear here. Sports is a means of engagement here, nothing more. You train somebody, put people inside a classroom, that's one style of pedagogy. So you have a lecture mode, which is one style of pedagogy. Sports is a means of engagement here. Sport for development, when we say sport for development's sake, it is a means of engagement which draws out certain experiences, certain lessons for a young person who will then benefit in the space of livelihood. That doesn't mean that this person, if he wants to become a mason, does not have to necessarily learn masonry. Yes, he would still need to learn that. But what we're trying to reflect on are there are several other skills that you need in life to conduct a reasonable life, where you know your rights, you know your responsibilities, you are a good citizen of the country, you can take care of the family, you can protect yourself from whatever, the political forces and social forces and economic forces. I mean, you're talking about different contexts here. So as a Dalit child, for example, in a village, before coming to livelihood, there are 20 things that you need to go through, 20 hoops that you need to go through to come up to a stage where you can actually lead a reasonably economically productive life, which is a job. So sport can possibly be a catalyst there. Again, I think I need to go back to my statement. It's not my magic bullet. It is a tool. It is a way of engagement. And I think we're being fairly humble about that. We're not claiming the moon here. It is a tool, and it's a very good tool. Like most of us who use social tools to change behavior, this is a very effective tool. That's my contention. I think a lot of the panelists would agree on that.
Thank you. I'm Anders from Footballing Vietnam. First on girls' participation. When we came to Vietnam and started football, age group is from 6 to 15. There weren't any girls playing football, not one single. And we have a school approach, so we went to the schools and asked the boys there, do you want to play? And they, of course, they all say yes, and say, yeah, you can play on one condition, you bring a girl. 7 years later, the whole concept of girls not playing football is gone. You go to the school today and you get just as many girls as boys raising their hand when we ask them if you want to play. We still fight some of their parents and some of the headmasters, but the girls themselves and the boys themselves totally accepted it. Give them a piece of paper and some crayons and tell them to draw football, and a considerable number of the players will have ponytails. So, can be done. Livelihood. We see that the young girls, reaching the age of 14, 15, starting to think about a career, they tend to think along the line of gym teachers. It's become like the thing now for the girls in the projects to lay a lot, how do you say, make a plan on how to get the necessary education to become gym teachers. The boys on the other side, of course, they want to be professionals, they want to play Manchester United and in Real Madrid. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen to most of them. So we try to take them down on the ground a little bit, and telling them that from every 1 million playing here, maybe one will be successful. But clearly we see that the effect of being in an organized activity of a certain quality do something to you as a human being. And I think that is what we talked about. Yes. That is what we talked about here. But having the perspective that the process we bring you through in our program makes you ready for life. That we should be very clear on. I want to add one thing. I heard people stating that we plan to start with sports. I heard many people say that. Bring on girls' participation, bring on activity for disabled from day one. If you start with the boys and then you try to add all the others and ethnic minorities, and it's much more difficult. Put it on the table from day one, and it's being accepted much more easily. Thank you.
There's one more question. Unless you should have been here. We had plenty seats.
Joke Paris from Oceania. It's a question for Manju. I may have misunderstood this, but what you were saying is identifying that the current training you're providing, there's expectations for youth, and there's not always enough jobs. So they come in thinking they'll get a job, and they come out. What would be the interest for Microsoft to provide these soft skills in a community where there's no jobs? How would you sell that internally from a return aspect? Is it something that we need to be in place from policy and corporate social responsibility all the way down, or how? I mean, it's great to hear you say this, but I'm curious on how you would actually take that to your board or whoever it needs to go to.
So I think let me first clarify what you've heard. What I was saying is in some of the areas that we work in. So we have, as I said, we work with a lot of non-profit partners. Some of the non-profit partners, in particular Aga Khan, works in areas where we're working with rural girls in minority community. We're even getting them to a skilling center. Means that we have to start a center in what's called a madrasa or a learning center for the Muslim girls, definitely. So we've created strategies to have them as part of a skilling program. I think what I was alluding to is that when we started doing these trainings initially, when we started our training programs, we had more boys coming in than girls. And I did mention that our metric was around skilling and putting them in jobs. Slowly that balance shifted and we had more girls coming in, but not as many girls wanted to go for the job. And that's when we had the focus group discussion with them. We realized that maybe our program in turn is creating a high aspiration level, because this is what they already know of the program. The program is very well known that it helps young people to get a job or start an enterprise. However, their reality is that it's not always possible for them to go for a job. So we've created programs in the community for putting them into jobs or helping them start an enterprise. Does that positioning is clear that we didn't get into there to just train them on soft skills. We're still clear that we are driving a livelihoods program, but we have to expand the definition of livelihoods from just skilling and getting them to join formal sector to actually look at how agriculture-based enterprises can help these young people girls to be productive. So we're not going there just for soft skills. So that's one thing I want to. So does that clear what I'm saying?
So there's no intention that these people will ever have a placement or work with Microsoft?
No, they will have, no. So placement with Microsoft does not have an office in Bihar. But what we will do is we have partners in Bihar who these girls can go and join those. What I'm saying is we want to move out of just formal sector employment, because that doesn't work for all the young girls in our community. It'll work for many, but for the Muslim minority girl, it has not worked. We continue working with parents, we continue working with some of the girls who want to at least step out and go 2 kilometers away to a job. But for many who don't want that option, we have to look beyond a formal job, employment, and help them to create something in their community.
Just wanted to add to this because this is also moving myself, and when I heard that you see that simply there are not enough jobs available, so we do not do our job properly if we just work with the youngsters and skill them and get them ready, and then let them go out there and understand that there's simply not enough jobs. So I think an answer to this would be, okay, we have to work with the individuals, but on the same time we have to work with the environment. So I think this is, if we go back to the idea next step, so perhaps this is the one limiting factor which we have to face. So how can we create new opportunities, job opportunities, livelihood opportunities? So it's beyond actually sports for development. It's the opportunity domain, and perhaps we have to really look at this as well. There was another statement, the mobility with Muslim girls. Mobility could be one answer to this particular question. So what can we do in this domain, mobility, and perhaps not only on a national scale, but on a global scale, as we hear together? I mean, that could be really an interesting topic as well.
Sure. Thanks for your input. I think we need to call it a day. I think it's 6 o'clock and I can see a lot of tired faces, but thank you so much. I think it's been fairly engaging. I didn't see a single sleepy head. There were a few people ducking away for a few moments, but I saw them get up in no time.
It's a credit to them.
It's a credit to them, not us. Of course not. This is not my way of taking credit myself. But I think it's been a very, very enlightening discussion. I didn't know the surprise that I was going to get, that Anuradha madam and Ravi, both of them are kind of just vanishing, and I was getting frantic SMSs that get them off, where they'll miss their flights. we'll have to pay them cancellation charges and whatever else. But going forward, I think there's a lot of learning that we take home. And so that brings us to the end of day 1 of Next Step 2014. I hope you had a fantastic day. I enjoyed myself. And I enjoyed the surprise role of moderating here. And as you can see, I love to go on and on, but I'm finally calling it a day, 6:05. Hope to see you at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow morning. We have a very interesting session on non-communicable diseases, because I strongly believe that that is the biggest next step we need to take. The whole of mankind is being faced by this big burden of non-communicable diseases. And if we don't look at it seriously, we are in for very, very troubled times. So come over at 9 o'clock. We'll look forward to another exciting day tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.